Convention reinvention. For the first time in decades, the two major political parties are talking about holding national conventions before the upcoming elections. But I'm not talking about the presidential election 3 years from now. No, I'm talking about next year's midterm elections, holding national conventions before next year's midterms. Welcome to Whole Hog Politics. My name is Bill Sammon. I'm joined as usual by my old pal, Chris Stirewalt. We both work at The Hill and we both work at News Nation, but only you, Chris, are the author of Whole Hog Politics, which is a newsletter that is free to those who can scan the QR code that's on the screen right at this very moment. We can put a man on the moon, we can put a QR code on the screen.
The production values continue. You've hurtled forward into, you've smashed through the tech barriers. You're basically, are you AI? That's what I want to know, Bill
Small step
Sammon.
for man, one giant leap for Whole Hog Politics. Chris, I happen to think that both national parties will hold midterm conventions next year because I think it works for both of them. In fact, I think it may become the norm for the foreseeable future. But before I get into any of my reasoning, I want to get your take on whether the parties will hold midterm conventions and whether they should.
Well, it's an idea so terrible, so astonishingly
that of
stupid,
course it'll work.
that of course it will have to be tried again, because like a lot of things from the 1970s, America seems determined to try everything that was correctly concluded after the 1970s. We should probably stop doing that. Your brief history is, after getting pantsed in the 1972 presidential election, Democrats held a midterm convention in 74, but they did it after the midterm election. And then they did it again in 78, again in like December, as a way to, the idea was we're going to unite the party. You may recall that the Democratic Party suffered from profound divisions in the 1970s, a hangover from Vietnam substantially, but other issues too. So we're going to unite the party and we will go forth and prosper. And the 1974 joint was unremarkable, I think. 78, catastrophe, right? So 78 is a catastrophe. Carter administration wants it. I think they held it in Memphis. They want to have it. They want to do it. And the rest of the Democratic Party, Ted Kennedy, looking at you, says, I don't think we don't want to go to your pep rally. So they mostly reject it. And then they do it again in 82, but this time they say we're going to do it before the vote because our problem was we waited till after the vote. We're going to do it before the vote. What were they talking about? Same stuff they're talking about now. Israel, support for Israel in, I think, 82 was a huge issue. Certainly the divisions within the party were put on display. So when Democrats started talking about doing this, I thought, what a terrible idea, because you don't want to have a united party in a midterm. You want a party that fits, as Rahm Emanuel taught Democrats in 2006, different horses for different courses, right? Some places you're going to want, in North Carolina, they're going to want their Senate candidate to be real moderate. Real moderate. And then in some districts, they're going to want to, in Nancy Pelosi's district, they're going to want a progressive. That's fine, because the only thing that a party out of power has to be agreed on is that they think that the party in power stinks. That's it. That's all you're looking for. And then the Democrats said, no, we're going to get together. And I thought, who's going to read the land statement at the beginning of this? What many catastrophes will await your party? How do you decide who will speak? Will Bernie Sanders have a speaking voice? And then if you're Roy Cooper in North Carolina, you don't want to be on stage with Bernie Sanders. You don't want to go to the same event as the Democratic Party. It's just this colossally stupid idea. And I thought, well, this may help Republicans in the midterms. And then you know what the Republicans did 30 seconds later? Donald Trump said, we're doing it too.
Yeah.
We're doing it too. I thought, oh my gosh, you want to hold an infomercial for your biggest problem in 2026. The Republicans' biggest problem in 2026, they have unified control of government, and the government is uniformly controlled by Donald Trump. It will be a referendum on Donald Trump. I don't think they'll get much coverage outside of right-wing media for doing it, but what they will get is a 2-day orgiastic, columned, gold-leafed spectacular of Donald Trump, which is exactly what their candidates in places where they need to sell themselves as moderates don't need. So I was floored by the whole thing. I was floored by the whole discussion because it was so stupid.
This is going to be one of those rare cases, Chris, where you and I may have to disagree a little, and here's why. I actually think, I get your point about, different candidates in different districts have different imperatives because, one district is more moderate and another one's more liberal and so on and so forth. But I also think that in a general sense, politics is becoming more national. People have always said, all politics is local. Well, increasingly, all politics is national. You can't run for dog catcher in Akron, Ohio, without getting asked about your opinion of Donald Trump. And I think the stakes are so high in next year's midterms, because think about this. We make a big deal of the quadrennial presidential elections, and rightly so. And then we sort of give short shrift to the midterms. Well, they're just the midterms, whatever. I think there is so much at stake because the margins are so close in the House and frankly in the Senate, but mainly in the House, that depending on how the House goes, that will determine whether President Trump will be able to continue to enact his legislative agenda. That is everything in national politics, whether or not Trump gets to continue to enact his legislative agenda. Therefore, I think the parties are making the calculation, we got to go big in the midterms. We've got to have a national message. And I think Trump, you're right. It's going to be a referendum on Trump, but it was going to be a referendum on Trump whether they have a national convention or not. I think this allows Trump to amp up his base, to get everybody together, to...
How could they be more amped up? What is the up amping that his base? What is the deficiency? There was a poll out. I think it was Gallup, talking about satisfaction with the direction of the country. Democrats are at 0%. 0% of Democrats. I'm sure there were some in the sample, but statistically 0%.
The lowest Gallup has ever recorded in its history.
The Democrats don't need to motivate their voters. Their voters are motivated. If 0%, there's no Democrat, statistically speaking, in the country that says, well, I don't know, let's see how things are going. Let's hang in there. They're maxed out. Everybody's maxed out. The midterm election is a contest of your base versus their base. The base of the Republican Party is I'll put it this way. I think you have a better point to make about the Republicans in this sense, which is in the places where Donald Trump could help Republicans, because let's say it's let's take North Carolina, just as it's the most hotly contested Senate seat. And it's very hard to get into the House map because we have much more gerrymandering to go, many more court decisions, all of that to be figured out. But let's just take North Carolina. So there's an argument that says that there will be Republicans or MAGA Trump supporters who will not turn out to support Michael Whatley in North Carolina. If Donald Trump can find a way to juice those voters, it will help them catch up with the already super high Democratic intensity. They had a state Senate election outside of Sioux City in Iowa. The Democrats would chew through iron bars to go vote, right? They picked up what should have been, I think it was an R+12 district in western Iowa, very Republican place. And the Democrats won it, and it shifted control of the Iowa State Senate. The Republicans have to understand they are in a position that they were not for most of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. They are the plurality party in the country, but they have the low intensity voters, right? That was the Democrats' problem for 70 years. Now it's the Republicans' problem. So how do you motivate Republican voters? The way you motivate Republican voters is with Donald Trump. But of course, if Donald Trump, for every, I will shut up by saying this. Donald Trump is the greatest turnout engine I have ever seen in American politics, and for both sides, right? He can get Republicans to the polls, but he gets more Democrats oftentimes to the polls. So I know they're probably going to go through with it because it's such a preposterously dumb idea. But I want you to think back to the Democratic, the DNC meeting they had in Minnesota this week. Starts with a land acknowledgement.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? And then for the Democrats, we say, okay, let's talk about what role trans activists are going to have. Will the trans activists be heard or not heard? And then, even worse, who gets to talk and who doesn't get to talk? Ruben Gallego would probably like to talk. And Roy Cooper would not like to talk.
Yeah.
Picking that list, that's why the Democrats
agree.
stopped doing it. They stopped doing it because it was
I will
counterproductive
agree
and divisive.
that it probably works better for Republicans than Democrats, especially given the fact that Donald Trump is the head of the Republican Party. But Chris, most rock bands have amplifiers that go to 10, but
10.
But Spinal Tap has an amplifier that goes to 11. Now you talk about they're already amped up. So they're already amped up, dude. There is no end to the amping up that Donald Trump is doing to his base. It's constant. It doesn't wait till the midterms. It doesn't wait till the next election. It's every day. It's every hour. I mean, look at this week. I mean, we talk about the mini conventions. And by the way, if Trump has anything to do with it, the Republican one, there'll be nothing mini about the Republican one. The guy's a showman,
and it'll be at
gigantic.
The White House.
But look at he gets everybody riled, all the Democrats riled up about sending, National Guard into D.C. Okay, any other normal Republican president would have said, okay, good, I got them all riled up. Let's move on to something else. No, Trump says, now we're going to go to Chicago. Now we're going to go to, or he gives a 3-hour and 17-minute, any other president would have done a pool spray at the top of the cabinet meeting. I used to cover the White House for 10 years, Democrats and Republican presidents. This is how it was done. Trump says, let's bring the press in for 3.5 hours. Let's just free associate. Let's just flood the zone. I thought the flooding of the zone was a first 100-day thing. We are on day 222 of this presidency. And honestly, the amount of stuff he's putting out there, the firings, the politics, the policy, the tariffs, the announcements, it has a political utility in that it keeps Democrats sort of on their heels. It keeps the press sort of playing catch up. But don't you think that that's still going to be the case a year from now? That they're going to want to keep that up to 11, maybe go to 12?
All Democrats need to do is be a reasonable alternative. It's all they need to do. They just need to be quiet. They need to make like a hole in the water and have people basically forget what they hated about the Democratic Party, what those persuadable voters hated about the Democratic Party, about inflation and immigration, right? Those were the boat anchors around Democrats in 2024. They need time to soothe that and for Democrats to look like basically just a reasonable alternative, that or the not Trump party. I have to remind myself sometimes that it's only been 8 months. Yeah. It's only been 8 months. And Donald Trump has managed to give back his higher approval rating. He has managed to alienate an increasingly large number of Republicans. His trade policies, taking over shares of companies, vowing that he's going to do more. The Ukraine situation is a mess. And every day, you're right, Donald Trump says, today I want to talk about this. And because the press can't help itself and Democrats can't help them, everybody's like, well, did you see what they said at the meeting? And did you see all this stuff? But when you look at what's going on and how things are going and what Americans think about the economy and how all this stuff is going. I was wrong about the shape of the 2024 election. I thought that the 2024 election was a persuadable voter election, right? In the sense that it was how's this going to go based on vibes or direction, right? I to some degree fell for a vibes-based argument.
Election, wasn't it? Or
it was a fundamentals election. The party in power was unpopular, and all of the dashboard indicators for the party in power in 2024 were bad, right? The direction of the country, how people felt about things, the incumbent president's approval rating, all of the dashboard indicators said, oh, the party in power will not retain the White House. But then I remembered how good Donald Trump was at helping Democrats. And I thought, I don't know. They really turn out in huge numbers, and Donald Trump is really unpopular. I don't know. Maybe it really is a toss-up. And it turned out that it was a decisive win for Donald Trump. And I would just caution Republicans. It's a fundamentals election again. The midterms are going to be a fundamentals election again. If Donald Trump's approval rating is bouncing around near 40%, we have a slew of competing polls today that are falling in a range of 38 to 45. So call it 41. If Donald Trump's approval rating is 41 and people continue to feel bad about the economy, it doesn't matter. And this is my gripe about the redistricting discussion too. Yeah, there's a seat here, a seat there, and and by the way, there are knock-on effects to doing the redistricting in California, in Texas. My gosh, if they do it in Indiana, there's a reason that a bunch of governors in both parties have said, no, we will not do that here, because there is a cost to be paid. But we talk all this stuff about these seats. The midterm election will be a referendum on the party in power. And the president every day continues to, and you're very right that for winning the news cycle, it's highly effective. For winning the news cycle and holding attention and keeping all eyes on him, it's very effective. If he does this for another year, it will the snapback will be profound. And when we look over at like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the whole conflama this week with the mass exodus and the firings and the outrage, and these are people, by the way, that were all appointed by this president. You look at all that stuff happening. Certainly, it's getting a lot of attention. Certainly, people are paying attention. But then I go over and I look at the polls and including polls that are more favorable to Trump and polls that are less favorable to Trump, for Trump. And I look at them and I see all of the dashboard indicators going red. I see every single one on crime, on immigration, on the economy, all of the core issues for Republicans. I see red arrows, not green arrows. And that I'll shut up by saying, if this was the trajectory going forward, the Republicans would lose the Senate and the House. I don't think this is the trajectory going forward, because I think next week Congress will come back in session and the narratives will change. I think what we've seen a lot this month is Congress is gone. The president doesn't legislate. He's not particularly interested in legislating at this moment. Congress will come back, and then they'll start being Congress again. And I think the narrative will
I'm going to
probably
disagree
shift.
with you again, Chris, because you seem to think that, and I get your point about the midterms are going to be a referendum on the party in power, and if Trump's approval ratings are not good, then the Republicans are simply going to have a bad night. I get that. But I don't think, I also, I happen to think that the redistricting wars will have an impact. My point is that those are not two mutually exclusive scenarios. In other words, whatever is going to happen with Trump's approval rating is going to happen, and it's going to have its impact on the overall success or failure of Republicans. But separate from that will be the issue of whether or not Republicans can pick up a couple of seats, net a couple of seats, when all of these different states get done redistricting. So unless it's a blowout Republican election or a blowout Democratic election, in which case netting a couple of Republican seats in the redistricting wars really isn't going to matter, it could be a close election. And in that case, the redistricting thing could matter. It could matter a great deal.
So Democrats could take a total, Gavin Newsom and California could end up with total egg on their face, right? If the economy turns around, if Putin yields in Ukraine, if a bunch of stuff starts working out for Republicans, if these big gambles that Trump has taken start paying off, there's a world in which Donald Trump is at a 47% approval rating, and the California Democrats will have moved the slider over, and they'll end up losing or netting out to none on their side. Same is true for Republicans. They're making a big bet in all these places that 2020, you said it at the beginning, and it's very true. The midterm electorate is a third smaller than the quadrennial electorate. These are the most partisan, most engaged voters. There are some true independents at the edge. Everybody leans one way or the other. But the question here is, who's going to win the suburbs? Who's going to win the high propensity voters? And there's a chance that the California Democrats and in other places, if they try redistricting, that it will end up bad for them. But Republicans also need to be aware that they're banking on a level of Hispanic support that I do not think would be there for them if they did it again. What Trump has said about the midterms is basically, this is how we did in 2024, and we're going to do it again in the midterms. History tells us that will not be the case no matter what, but it certainly tells me that when we have the masked ICE agents and we have bragging about the detention camps and we have that we'll deport anybody we want to Uganda anytime we want it all, and all of that stuff, and we look at the president's numbers with Hispanic voters, the Republican map in Texas is predicated on Republicans replicating their 2024 numbers with Hispanic voters in these heavily Hispanic districts to the south and west. I don't think that's what's happening. So my point is, absolutely, redistricting will have its consequences, but it will also have unintended consequences, and it will cause snapback, and it will do this. And the parties are going to do whatever they do on this, and they can move the sliders in terms of what kind of outcome they're going to end up with. Are there going to be 28 seats in play, or are there going to be 19 seats in play? They can move their sliders based on what they think the political climate is going to be like a year from now. But they don't know what the political climate's going to be like a year from now. I don't know what the political climate's going to be like a year from now. And straight line projections are always dangerous.
Because we talk a lot about how the midterms will be a referendum on the party in power. And let's face it, Trump is to a lot of people, he is the party. He's the party in power to him. But let me ask you this, because I saw some polling this week where it broke down various issues, not just Trump's approval rating, but how, is he underwater on this issue or that issue? And one of the issues I saw he was underwater, I think it was 11 points, was crime. Now, this comes as he's, really going all in on, crime is out of control. Let's take over some of these Democratic cities. This is a winning issue. And yet he's underwater on it. So my question to you is this. Even though Trump is going to be kind of on the ballot, even though he's not on the ballot anymore for the rest of his political career, as far as we know. Is it true? Can the Republican candidates benefit from the Republican brand in terms of, okay, the Republican brand now is tough on crime, okay? Will they benefit from that without getting the negatives of, but when Trump is tough on crime, sometimes his tactics or the way he executes it, or he goes too far, turns into a negative. Will that negative carry over to the other Republican candidates?
The masked federal forces grabbing people off the streets is very, very bad. Politically, it's very, very bad. The reality for Republicans, if you look at Trump's approval rating, he did not start his slide right away. he started his slide earlier than most presidents do, right? Because you know how it goes. You come in, you got the honeymoon, numbers are high. Trump had his highest ever job approval ratings in the early days. He's hitting 50, he's hitting 51. He's hanging around in a place that was totally unknown for Trump. And he got a win bonus. And people, all right, well, you got to give it to the guy. And plus, the Democrats were out of control. The woke stuff, the border stuff, the inflation stuff. Okay, give the man his due. It's a comeback story like no other. And then he gets on the schneid sooner even than Biden did. Biden had a short honeymoon period. Trump had a super short.
Today
period.
is the anniversary of the Afghan withdrawal, which was the point at which Biden's presidency started to slip down, at least his approval rating started to slip down.
He had been on a typical slide to this point, and then that was the turbocharge where you had the national security people who had been open to the idea, but were like, okay, smell you later, brother. That's ridiculous. And it created a narrative of incompetency and failure that submerged Biden, and he couldn't escape it. And to the midterm point, the Democrats managed to not have 2022 be a referendum on the president. It was kind of amazing. They did it by not They didn't pool up in large numbers. They didn't have a stupid convention, for example. Can you imagine? They didn't do anything like that. They kept Biden at arm's length where they could, and basically stayed at a distance. And then somehow the Republicans turned it into a referendum on Donald Trump, which was a crazy thing to do. So the Republicans, instead of having a big, nice win in 2022, made it about Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker and cuckoo bananas candidates all over the place. And that's how Democrats lost, but mitigated the size of the loss in 2022. So for Trump, your question about can you have the benefits of being tough on crime without having to defend the specific policies of the Trump administration? And I think that depends substantially on where you are. And I think it depends substantially on what the Democrats in your district are doing. So if you were, and I don't know of a place where this is true. I'm sure we could think of House districts, but if you were in a competitive Senate, so let's say in North Carolina, we'll keep going back to North Carolina because I bet we will a bunch. But so do North Carolina. If you are Michael Whatley, you're going to run against Roy Cooper as an incumbent. You're going to treat him like an incumbent because everybody remembers his time as governor and he was popular. So if you are Whatley, you're going to attack Cooper on soft on crime. Anything he ever said that sounded like, if he ever said the word D and fund and police in the same paragraph, you're going to cut it together and try to make Whatley. Whatley will try to make Roy Cooper into a radical anti-police, da-da-da-da-da. And in that sense, if Whatley can keep it on offense, then he can benefit from people's perceptions about Democrats as soft on crime. Unfortunately, for Whatley, it will also be true that the people who live in Mecklenburg County in suburban Charlotte will be watching Donald Trump sending masked agents and soldiers into other cities. And the part that hurts my heart so much in all of this is I know that there will be violence, and I know that there will be confrontation. I know Trump wants the confrontation. I know that that works in what we saw in Los Angeles. And for these National Guard members who are being sent by their governors to Washington, D.C., and now they're getting ready for new deployments, new domestic deployments to go into these other cities. The summer of 2020 was such a terrible time. And I, by the way, cannot recommend enough my colleague Thomas Chatterton Williams' book about the summer of 2020. It's just brilliant and great, and how the country lost its mind. But I'm so sad at the thought of having to replay some of those scenes between protesters and now National Guard members who are just trying to pay for college, right, and getting sent into the front lines of this stuff. It makes me sad.
Chris, you are also host of the wonderful Sunday morning show, The Hill Sunday, which airs on News Nation. What's happening this week on The Hill Sunday?
I love what we're doing this week. I am super excited about what we're doing this week. It's a back to school special. So it's a holiday weekend. And on the one hand, there's lots of news for all the things that we just said. But it's also a good opportunity to talk about something that's important, which is what's happening with education policy in the United States. So we've got the Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon. We've got the Democratic governor of Delaware. We have the superintendent of schools from Mississippi. Do you know how much better the schools in Mississippi are now?
They used to be trailing quite a bit for many years.
Right. The joke, West Virginia's unofficial state motto was "Thank God for Mississippi," and now what do we have? What do West Virginians have left? Mississippi vaulted out of 48th place into 16th place. They focused on literacy, so it's a
By the
story
way,
that's
you can make that joke, and I can
gonna
laugh at that joke because I know you're from West Virginia.
I'm from West Virginia. Yeah. You
But
can't make that joke.
Ohio
can't make that joke. West Virginia can make that joke. And then we have, and I think you'll enjoy this one very much. What are the consequences of the baby bust, of declining fertility rates for our schools? And this is not something that I had really wrestled with. And we have a fantastic expert on birth rates. And they keep telling me I can't say birth rates. I have to say fertility rates. But what does that mean for schools? And the answer may be, whether you like school choice or don't like school choice, as we watch the population of children hollow out and we see these huge declines, a system that was built around more kids, 100 years of build more, we need more. Now it's going to go the other direction. And I think school choice is going to be, whether they like it or not, I think school choice is going to become the reality.
I think that's fascinating. I literally just this week read an article about schools closing because of the declining population for school. And I'm an old boomer. When I was going to school, there were Catholic schools in Cleveland. There were 40, 45 kids per classroom. And that was the sort of the peak of that. But Chris, I think we're out of time now. That's all we have time for this week. I am Bill Sammon, joined by Chris Stirewalt. We hope to see you next time on Whole Hog Politics.